And we are live. I'm still messing around with different lighting stuff, so I hope this works. Hello, everybody. I'm going to move the camera around a bit. Hello, James. Hello, Sunshine. Oh, I was going to get a drink ready before I started. Too late. Hello. Oh. Puppy's in the background this time. Hello, Krista. Hello in South Korea. Really? You really in South Korea? Hello, everybody. Well, it's been only one day since my last broadcast, so that's pretty good. It means the beard game is one day stronger. I'm going to keep this going until it just looks ridiculous. Hello in Virginia. Hello in Wisconsin. Hello in Clearwater. So what I wanted to do today was tackle the questions that I actually get specifically in the email account growing up in Scientology at gmail.com. I know I've copied and pasted some of the questions that have come in there. I've copied and pasted some of those questions into my document, so I might have addressed some of these. But I think for the most part, I've probably been missing these. So I figured why not just go through all of them and clean them out if I can. I'm actually going to go most recent backwards. And then once I've done a whole bunch of this, I'll review the questions and the comments that have come in on this particular broadcast, and I'll see if I can tackle some of those. You watch the news. Who watches the news? All my news comes from the YouTubes. Hello in Colorado. All right, so let's see what we got here. Let's start tackling some of these. Why does the Sea Org, along with the Free Winds, still exist? Wasn't that just a hiding place for Hubbard? If it was, what is its current purpose? Thank you for answering in advance. Good question. The purpose of the Free Winds was never to allow L. Ron Hubbard to evade any authorities. That was, arguably, the purpose of the creation of the Sea Org, right? And just so you know, I do these videos on my phone, and since the live broadcast, I don't have it on airplane mode. So if I keep swiping at my phone, it's to get rid of notifications. Okay, in the book by Steve Kinane called Fair Game, he gives a fantastic history and description of how the goings-on in Australia and in the UK created an environment where Hubbard had to come up with a way to escape and evade the authorities, and that was date coincident with the creation of the Sea Organization. And it really did seem to me for the first time while reading Steve Kinane's book that this pressure, these investigations on behalf of various governments, was absolutely the catalyst for creating the Sea Organization. Within Scientology, though, there are no Scientologists or Sea Org members who know that or believe it. They believe that L. Ron Hubbard had to create the Sea Organization because the upper level OT research that he was doing could only be done in a very calm environment away from the busy crossroads of society, and that's why he had to be on a ship and at sea. When it's pretty clear the real reason was he was trying to evade arrest, and it was simply safer to be on the sea in international waters where you really cannot be arrested. So the purpose of the Sea Organization itself and the purpose of him spending so many years on the flagship Apollo, which was the flagship of the Sea Organization, whereas the purpose of all of that was to serve as a hiding place for Hubbard. The Free Winds ship itself wasn't even commissioned until after Hubbard's death. And currently the purpose that the Free Winds serves is the Free Winds, which is the name of the Scientology ship, is the only place and the only Scientology organization that has the authority to deliver OT8. And OT8 is the highest auditing level that there is in Scientology currently. It's the highest level that has been released to the public to do. Scientologists believe that there are many more unreleased OT levels that LRH finished researching before his death. And Scientologists are told that there are certain benchmarks that need to be attained in Scientology's route to expansion before these further OT levels are allowed to be released. And that is how David Miscavige, it's one of the ways David Miscavige controls all of the current Scientologists, especially the ones who've already done the entire bridge, is by saying, well, you might have done through OT8, but I've got OT9 and 10. and unless you do what I say, you will not be allowed to do OT 9 and 10. So that's how he gets all these OT8s to donate so much money towards the new Scientology church buildings that Miscavige has been feverishly buying. It is the local Scientologists in each city that fork over the money to buy these new buildings. And it's the OT8s that are put in charge of fundraising the other Scientologists in their city for that money. And that's how he controls them, is this idea that they have to do what he wants or they won't be able to do the next OT levels when they're released. By the way, I have to put in a plug for the TV show called The Path. I don't remember if it's on Hulu or whatnot because I watch it streaming through another service. But The Path, and who's the actor from Breaking Bad who says bitch all the time? I can't believe I'm blank on his name. He's one of my favorite guys. The Path cast. Aaron Paul. I knew his name was Aaron. Aaron Paul and his TV show, The Path, might as well be a show about Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, and David Miscavige. Please watch this show. I'm going to do a whole series of videos just about each episode of the show and how that storyline came from Scientology. I have learned that there absolutely was a former Scientologist consulting on the show. I have not found out who it was. So if anybody knows, please tell me. I would love to know. Okay, I think I have answered that question. Delete. Okay, this is a long-winded question. I'm just going to tackle it. I haven't read it all, but it's several paragraphs. The question is basically this. I know in Scientology that OT3 Xenu story is highly confidential, and I've gathered from the videos I've seen that it is not a central part of Scientology to begin with. However, everybody and their grandmother knows about this story. At least the priestess? All right, whatever. And many non-Scientologists have the impression that it is a central story of Scientology, kind of like the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus in Christianity. I'd imagine this is hindering recruitment of new Scientologists. Would you agree? Okay, there might be more to the email, but I'm just going to tackle it right there. I absolutely agree with what you have said in this email. First of all, the OT3 story, the Xenu story, is highly confidential in Scientology. I was in Scientology from the age of 4 to the age of 26, and I never even heard the word Xenu uttered until after I had left Scientology. One of my posts, when I was in the Sea Org, I was even posted in an organization that was specifically there to deliver the OT levels. And not only was I on post in this organization, my post was to help the people who had already attested to clear and were getting ready to start OT1, to help them through the last final course actions they had to do before being allowed to start OT1. And yet I still never heard the word Xenu ever uttered until, I don't know, I was 29 or 30 years old, well after I had left the C organization, and right around the time that I actually had left Scientology itself. And yes, because everybody in the world does know the Xenu story, anyone who has access to Google, anyone who's ever seen the South Park episode, anyone who's ever read a tabloid, knows about Xenu and OT3 and body thetans, and they do think it's like literally what Scientologists believe. So let me touch on this because I want to make sure I don't sound like I'm contradicting myself. A very small percentage of Scientologists ever even make it up to OT3. People like myself who spent their entire life working for the church never even came close to getting to OT3 because we're too busy working for the church to actually go up Scientology's bridge to total freedom. And I just totally lost my train of thought. Whether this is a central aspect of Scientology. Even people who've done OT3 and then 4, 5, 6, and 7 point out that you don't have to believe the Xenu story in order to actually audit the OT levels. You do have to believe parts of this story. You do have to believe that Thetans, beings, were brought to Earth from another solar system 76 trillion years ago, and that millions of these beings were dropped into volcanoes on Earth and exploded with hydrogen bombs. And therefore, ever since that point, these beings have been floating around aimlessly the Earth, and now just stick to bodies, right? So you must have good Thetans who actually pick up the bodies and animate the bodies. And then you have these mostly dead Thetans that just stick onto your body like a parasite and affect your thoughts and your emotions and your physical health. So So when Scientologists get to OT3, they learn this theory of life that L. Ron Hubbard puts forth in OT3. Until you get to OT3, though, you never even heard it. And you've never even been exposed to this information. And since the vast majority of Scientologists never make it to OT3, that is why I have said, and others have said, that the OT3 story, the Xenu story, is not central to the subject of Scientology, because 90% of Scientologists have never even heard of it, so how could it be central to Scientology? Now, the story changes when you talk about the upper OT levels. Someone could argue, well, those upper OT levels are the true information of Scientology. You just don't get exposed to it until you're at that level. And that would be a totally valid argument. That once you get to that level, well, that is Scientology. How can you say it's not central? If at the highest levels it is central, then how can you say it's not central? So it really comes down to kind of semantics. I agreed that at the highest levels, the Xenu story is the story of Scientology, and it becomes the secret you're in on that nobody else is aware of. But if 90% of Scientologists have never even been exposed to that information, then you'll have to understand why people will say, that's not really what Scientology is about. All of the other 90% of Scientologists who've never heard the Xenu story, they sure as hell think they're Scientologists. They sure as hell would argue with you if you said they didn't know the truth about Scientology. So anyway, I could go on about this all day, but I think you get the point. It says the church must be aware that virtually everyone is aware of this story. Well, the executives of the church who are aware of all the media coverage, that they're aware that this is out there. David Miscavige is aware that this is out there. Trey Parker and Matt Stone blew the lid off of it over a decade ago. It's all over the internet, and it's mentioned in books and documentaries everywhere. Yeah, you're totally correct. Hypothetically, if the church were to come clean about this story and claim it to be an allegorical literature, would this do anything to increase recruitment numbers? So I don't think it would do anything to increase recruitment numbers, but it would be a huge violation of church policy regarding the upper OT levels. There are policies written by L. Ron Hubbard that very explicitly say if any Scientologist is ever, through any means found to have ever uttered these words, Xenu, body Thetan, to another Scientologist, they are hands down prevented from ever doing any further OT levels in Scientology. This is how closely a secret is held. Not only are people that have done the OT levels, not only is someone who's done OT3 not allowed to mention anything about it to people who have not done OT3, they're not even allowed to talk about it with other people who have done OT3. If two OT people who've done OT3 are found to have been chit-chatting amongst themselves about the material that's in OT3 and the Xenu story, both of these people, even though they did not break confidentiality in any way, right? Like both of them already knew the information, so you don't break confidentiality by discussing what you're both already allowed to know. And yet, with the policies that the church has on how this material is to be treated, those two people would run a high risk of not being allowed to ever do any other OT levels. So if someone in the church were to come out and acknowledge, like a spokesperson, and acknowledge that the OT3 story, the Xenu story, is really what's on OT3, I don't think, and just say it's allegorical, I don't think it would increase recruitment numbers. It would make all other OTs feel like they were now allowed to talk about the OT information. And also, you have to realize the people in Scientology who have not done OT3 yet, they have very, very high hopes and expectations for what kind of life-changing material they're going to learn on these confidential OT levels. And if someone in the church admitted that it was about Xenu and body Thetans, a lot of those Scientologists would be like, oh, fucking hell no, it better not be. I was hoping for something a little more interesting and life-changing than that. They would lose so many Scientologists, it's not even funny. I can tell you without a doubt that if I had learned earlier on in my Scientology career that these mythical, magical, powerful OT levels were all about a fucking story about body Thetans and Xenu and all this shit, I would have been like, oh no. I have better things to be doing with my time than working for this organization for 100+ hours a week. Like, no, it would have been a big problem for me. Okay, I think we're done with that one. Delete. Interview questions. Not going to do that one. That's more of an interview type thing. Not going to do that one. Not going to do that one. So a lot of these aren't actually questions. That's why I'm kind of going through them. All right, still making my way through here, trying to find an actual question. Okay, this is a good one. All right, here we go. I have a few questions for your next Q&A. What is the church's stance on the theory of evolution? It is my impression that evolution might conflict with some of L. Ron Hubbard's ideas, seeing how it states that the human mind and intelligence has evolved over time and not affected by a thetan. Or was this never really brought up? Excellent question. There was a book written by L. Ron Hubbard called The History of Man. And I'd have to double check the dates on this. But I'm pretty sure History of Man was written... I was going to say after Dianetics, but really before Scientology, but I think that's bullshit. All right, how do I want to answer this question? All right, here's my point about bringing up the History of Man. The History of Man is where L. Ron Hubbard gives his own theory on how the human body evolved on this planet. And he mentions that the part of the human body, the jaw, evolved from clams and oysters or other shellfish. He doesn't say mankind evolved from shellfish. His theory kind of has to do that with the fact that the human body evolved from many different ancestors. And as I sit here in front of you, I won't claim to know if that's already been disproven. Like, obviously, there has to be many different ancestors, for something to evolve into anything. But I know that scientifically no one has come out and been like, yes, and the mollusk was key to the evolution of the human jaw joint. Now, again, this thing about evolving from clams has also been somewhat taken out of context or blown out of proportion. Some people have a derogatory term for Scientologists. They call them clams. First of all, I think it's disgusting to come up with any derogatory nickname for a Scientologist. It's absolutely fucking disgusting, and I don't support it. I don't care whether you call them Sinos or Cybots or clams. It's fucking derogatory, and it's inappropriate, in my opinion. And also, Scientologists aren't in on the joke. Like, one of the first anti-Scientology websites I ever saw was clambake. Whatever it is. And I didn't get the joke. I was like, why is it called clambake? Like, I don't even get it. And it turns out the reason is people have this idea that all Scientologists think that we evolved from clams. And that's not accurate. First of all, the theory of evolution of the body on planet Earth is completely irrelevant to anything in Scientology. It's got nothing to do with anything. First of all, this book, History of Man, which is barely even an important book in modern Scientology, has like one line or one chapter or one paragraph, literally, not even a chapter, just a mention of the fact that the jawbone evolved from the joint of clams or mollusks or shellfish. Has nothing to do with anything important in Scientology. Okay, so why did I mention the History of Man? Oh, because Scientology as such barely even has a theory of evolution. And Scientology, nothing I've ever been exposed to in Scientology, which was very significant, a significant amount of information, ever directly contradicted, other than this mention about clams, any normal theory of evolution. Now, I'm sure you can go into History of Man and find other comments that L. Ron Hubbard made about where certain parts of the body evolved from. And all that stuff is probably total bullshit. But it also doesn't have really anything to do with Scientology. If I ignored History of Man and I just took everything else in Scientology as the source material for my answer to this question, I would have said this. L. Ron Hubbard has said, this is what Scientologists believe, that we as spiritual beings, we don't have a home universe or a home solar system or a home planet. Beings in Scientology are considered pretty much to be godlike. Like, there never was a beginning. Beings simply always have been. And you could maybe say that Scientology talks about sort of a spiritual Big Bang. Like, this gets into the subject of God. If God made everything, who made God? And someone can debate that question. Scientologists would say, if Thetans made everything, who made Thetans? And the Scientology answer to that question would be, Thetans just decided to exist one day, and boom, they existed. And I don't know how that would compare to how somebody might answer that question in regards to God. But so Scientology would say Thetans just came into existence one day, some 76 plus trillion years ago. And from that point, Thetans created the physical universe. And Thetans did it as a game. It was just a game. Thetans can do anything they want. And Thetans created the physical universe, and then basically they're almost like ran simulations. Like created a planet here, and boom, let life spontaneously evolve there. Created a planet here, and boom, let life spontaneously evolve there. There is nothing in Scientology that has to contradict normal scientifically accepted information about the theory of evolution, because a Scientologist would just say, well, Thetans created the planet and the universe, and life just evolved here. Like, it's not like certain Christian groups that say, the earth isn't really, the dinosaurs didn't really exist millions of years ago, or humans live with dinosaurs, or the earth is only 6,000 years old. Now, there is something in the OT3 story where L. Ron Hubbard says that these Thetans were dropped into the volcanoes on the Hawaiian Islands 76 trillion years ago. And you go, yeah, there weren't any volcanic islands on the Hawaiian Islands. There weren't any volcanoes on the Hawaiian Islands 76 trillion years ago. So, you can see from what I'm saying, there's many things L. Ron Hubbard have said about history on this planet in general that do seem to completely disregard any normal scientific consensus on those subjects. So I'm kind of rambling on this one. But as a Scientologist, I was never taught not to believe in the normal theory of evolution. That's kind of where I'm getting to with my point here. And nothing L. Ron Hubbard said in History of Man ever made any Scientologist I've ever met object to the theory of evolution. Now, maybe we can separate the theory of evolution itself from, maybe a Scientologist would say, well, no, I believe in the theory of evolution. I just believe that the human body evolved from different plants and organisms than Scientologists say they evolved from. Than scientists say they evolved from. And some Scientologists might feel that way. Like, some Scientologists may have read the History of Man and say, L. Ron Hubbard's word is the word of God, essentially. And therefore, everything he has said in here, I believe more than I believe scientists, And that's possible, because some Scientologists literally just do believe every word L. Ron Hubbard has ever said. But I would just point out that it doesn't really matter whether the human jaw evolved from a clam or whether it evolved from a Neanderthal monkey hybrid. It doesn't really matter. It kind of has nothing to do with Scientology. Okay, next. You have mentioned before that your mom still provides auditing independently from the Church of Scientology. Is this what the church would classify as a squirrel, or am I mistaken about the definition? That is true. My mom does still provide auditing. It's actually how she makes her living. She provides Scientology auditing to people who have left Scientology. And believe it or not, there are people who've never been in Scientology that are still interested in getting Scientology auditing. I don't do that. I don't get auditing. I'm not interested in that. But I understand if people who are. I'm not the kind of guy that runs around being like, no, don't do auditing. It's terrible for you. I think in the right hands, being done by somebody who does want to help you, almost anything can be helpful. And that includes auditing, in my opinion. So what's the question here? Yes, well, Scientology actually has two definitions of a squirrel. One is anybody who provides Scientology auditing, or the church would say pretends to provide Scientology auditing, outside of the sanctioned activity of the Church of Scientology. Those people are automatically squirrels, whether they're doing auditing correctly or not. Scientology has a second definition of a squirrel, which is someone who basically alters the correct procedures of auditing. So if you are in Scientology and you're just constantly fucking up auditing people, you're probably going to get called a squirrel. If you're out of Scientology and you're doing any auditing at all, even if your auditing is exactly the same way it would be done within the Church of Scientology, they're still going to call you a squirrel. A squirrel is like the N-word. The squirrel is like the Scientology version of the N-word. It's like the worst thing you can call someone in Scientology. Almost even worse than an SP. Because a squirrel is like a special kind of SP who's trying to mess people up and hurt people by incorrectly applying Scientology procedures to them. Like, that's the connotation that exists in Scientology around this term squirrel. All right, what's next? By the way, sometimes I watch my videos back And I realize how annoying it is when I say, it's even annoying to me when I watch my own videos. But I guess I'm just not comfortable with quiet time. Okay, let's see. What's next? After watching last night's episode of Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath, it seems like the church missed their chance to learn from the mistakes of the Catholic Church and Joe Paterno. In these type of situations, people are just as infuriated with the people who covered up the crime as they are with those who committed the crime. If the church had taken a proactive approach before the show had aired to make amends and admit that some mistakes had been made in the past, but they were currently working on fixing the issues that allowed these sorts of crimes to go unreported, I think people would be a lot more forgiving towards the organization, but instead they deny and attack the victims, which is the same thing the Catholic Church did back in 2001, and it really backfired on them. Why can't the Church of Scientology realize their current tactics to discredit SPs makes them look even more guilty? You couldn't have said it better. I could not have said it better than you did if I tried. And the ironic thing is that the policies of the Church of Scientology are so varied and wide-ranging and contradictory that whatever solution, like if someone was working in the church, whatever solution someone comes up with, they can find a policy to support it or they can find a policy to negate it. And I know that a lot has been said recently that the Church of Scientology is absolutely bound by the words of the policies of L. Ron Hubbard, and they are never capable of changing their activities because they're bound by these policies. I've heard that said, and I know why it's said, and I agree with the intention behind that statement. But the truth is, if David Miscavige wanted to change his strategy and say, okay, good, we're going to go this way. We're going to do what you propose in your email. We're going to acknowledge the mistakes have been made. We're going to stop attacking everyone who claims something bad was done to them. We're going to stop trying to discredit people who were molested as children. We're going to stop trying to discredit people who were raped. We're going to stop trying to blame people's widows for their husband's suicide. If he actually wanted to change his course and change his operating procedure there, he could. And he could dig up L. Ron Hubbard policies and advices to support why that's the right thing to do. So when you say, why don't they do it? It's because David Miscavige is a goddamn sociopath. He is not capable of admitting guilt. He is not capable of feeling remorse. I think as a younger person, he probably was. I don't know what's happened. I do not know. Obviously, I'm not saying that everything was great back in the good old days and it's only gotten worse recently. I understand that L. Ron Hubbard did exhibit similar kinds of behavior. There is a big difference, though, between L. Ron Hubbard conducted himself and treated his fellow Scientologists and Sea Org members and the way that David Miscavige does those same things. L. Ron Hubbard, I believe, I never met him, obviously, but Mike Rinder has met him. I know people that have spent decades with L. Ron Hubbard, and they all say that he was capable of being as vicious as anybody and being as loud and having as bad a temper as everybody. But at the end of the day, no one actually wondered whether L. Ron Hubbard cared about the people who surrounded him. You can call him a con man. You can call him a liar. You can call him a megalomaniac. Those may all be accurate adjectives. But the people that were around him did not wonder whether he actually cared about them. And you can't say the same thing about David Miscavige. I don't think he gives a goddamn about anybody. Okay. The following question is only regarding the belief of extreme fundamental Scientologists, and by no means am I implying this to be the majority of Scientologists. Since Scientologists believe that we are all immortal things, and that our current life is only one of many, is there a slight disconnect between family members of extremely fundamental families? You would think that true believers would not consider their children or parents to really be related to them. Okay. So when you say disconnect, does this create a slight disconnect between the family members? How I want to address that is, it depends on the interpersonal relationship dynamics of that family. For example, if everyone in the family that we're talking about here, just as an example, if everyone in the family was a dedicated Scientologist, then I don't think, got something stuck in my throat. If everybody in this imaginary family was a dedicated Scientologist, I don't think you would feel a disconnect because everybody would feel and act like a normal, loving family. Because Scientologists, and every time I want to say something, I wonder if I'm in some way contradicting myself of something I've said earlier. Normal Scientologists are very loving, caring people. That's just a fact. And if Scientologists are very loving and caring about other Scientologists. Now, I feel like things I've said that might contradict that is this idea that Scientology has a snitching culture. and everyone's always ratting on everybody, and parents will report their kids, and kids will report their parents. That is true. But that stuff only comes into play when you're dealing with family members who aren't all on the same page and aren't acting like dedicated Scientologists. That's where you start to see the disconnect. That's where you start to see the snitching. But if everyone in the family is like a diehard Scientologist and they all worship at the altar of David Miscavige and L. Ron Hubbard, it's going to feel like a totally normal, loving, dedicated family. You'd never know there was anything about these people that predisposed them to disconnecting from parents or children or divorcing spouses or anything. So those factors only come into play when there's some sort of disharmony within the family as regards to Scientology. I hope that answers that question. All right, do you find it ironic that one of L. Ron Hubbard's worst fears would have been an IRS audit, but yet one of the most important practices of his religion is named auditing? This is a good one. Let me make sure my focus is okay here. Oh, okay. Doesn't seem to want to do anything. I get why that's ironic, but no, I don't find it ironic. So, I don't... L. Ron Hubbard it gives a lot of descriptions about... hold on. Hey, Glenn, come here. LRH gives a lot of description for why he uses the term auditing for Scientology counseling or processing. And his explanation is that the word audit means to listen. So my question would be more along the lines of, why does the IRS why is the word audit used to go through someone's financials? I don't know where that usage of the word originated from. But the reason auditing is used as a term is because it means to listen. And auditing is a term that was created with Dianetics before L. Ron Hubbard ever even tried to get into the area of religion or tax exemption or anything like that. I mean, maybe the original Hubbard Dianetics Research Foundations, maybe he tried to get those tax exempt. I actually don't know. But it certainly, the word auditing was certainly completely divorced from the concept of religion or tax exemption or anything. I would find it hard to believe that the original, I'll forget it. I just don't know. I don't know if those were tax exempt organizations in the early days of Dianetics, but I do know that if he tried to make them tax exempt, it sure as hell wasn't because it had anything to do with religion. Okay, so that was a good series of questions. That was all one email. A delete question. Here we go. From Courtney. I've been an outside observer of Scientology for 20 years, ever since I wrote a paper about the church in college. I've never been in, and neither has anyone I know. My question is about the actual number of active Scientologists. I know the generally accepted number for current members worldwide is 25,000 on the low side and 50,000 on the high side. Those are pretty much the exact numbers I use as well. I also seem to remember hearing or reading somewhere that at its peak, Scientology had about 150,000 members, but I might be remembering that wrong. No, that's pretty much exactly what I recall as well. Given what I know about Miscavige and what a control freak he is, I have to believe that he knows with a high degree of precision exactly what the real number of active Scientologists are, as well as historical data showing that numbers have been declining over the years and the decades. You would be 100% correct. It seems to me that it would be pretty easy for him to get the actual number of unique users who are actually receiving services from all the orgs, and he knows exactly how many members these are, and you would be correct. My questions are as follows. What do you think he makes of the fact that membership is falling instead of rising over time? Very good question. He thinks that he is surrounded by a bunch of incompetent, suppressive people who are out to destroy him and Scientology. If anybody below him is not achieving the level of expansion he tells them to achieve, and by the way, this is how David Miscavige manages. He just tells people what targets he wants to achieve, but he doesn't actually provide any he doesn't provide any structure or framework that would allow them to achieve those goals. Like, if you worked at a local Scientology organization and you only had 20 people in any given week who come into course, the church that church in that city only serves 20 people, and let's say they had one auditor, like actually on staff. David Miscavige, the kind of order that he would issue is, okay, you have to recruit 20 full-time auditors in the next month. Completely showing complete disregard for the fact that there's only 20 people in the entire state who even come and take a course at the church every week. There's like the orders are unrealistic. And this is something that when I was in Scientology, thought was totally appropriate. And then once I left Scientology and started being exposed to actual Fortune 500 companies and actually publicly traded companies on the stock market, and got to see how actual competent management people govern companies and issued guidance for, the expansion of the main statistics of the companies, whether it's revenue or earnings or just, new store growth or average ticket order or whatever. The guidance, where you say a company or a group is going to be in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years has to be based in reality, but that's not the way Scientology works. So it says, what do you think David Miscavige makes of the fact that the membership is declining? Oh, that he thinks he's just surrounded by people who are trying to sabotage the organization, sabotage him by not getting the stats up. L. Ron Hubbard says that a statistic doesn't just go down. It has to be pushed down and held down. All right, so L. Ron Hubbard's theory here is that Scientology, if you just got out of its way and just let it do its thing, just let people buy books and let them read them, you couldn't prevent Scientology from expanding. So when David Miscavige is sitting at the top and all of these main statistics of Scientology are going down, and you have the misfortune of working under David Miscavige, he doesn't come to you and say, okay, look, I see you're having trouble here. Let me help you do an analysis of this situation and see what the real problem is, and let's really figure out the correct solution. No. He just goes, your stat is down. You're doing that only to make me wrong because you have evil intentions towards me. Like, the guy's not fucking sane. And yes, he may have drawn his insanity from the works of L. Ron Hubbard, but then why hasn't everyone else at the top? Like, everyone at the top would not act like David Miscavige is acting. Like, look at Mike Rinder. The Mike Rinder you see today is relatively the same Mike Rinder that worked at the upper levels of Scientology for 30 years. Now, granted, the Mike Rinder today no longer believes the bullshit of Scientology, and when he was in the Sea Org, he did. But the Mike Rinder who was in the Sea Org didn't act like David Miscavige. Didn't think that David Miscavige was acting correctly or according to policy. He knew there was something wrong there. And that's why eventually he fucking escaped. So my point is, not everyone who grows up kneeling at the altar of L. Ron Hubbard turns out like David Miscavige. And I don't know what it is that has caused him to act like such a maniac. Maybe it's just the absolute power corrupts absolutely. Maybe it's just that principle. Who else besides David Miscavige would have access to the real numbers? I have to think that these people would be a pretty close guarded... I have to think that these would be a pretty close guarded secret. What? Oh, that these real numbers would be a pretty closely guarded secret since they look so bad for him as a leader. Only a few top executives would know. I knew I needed a drink before I started. My throat's all dry. I'm not going to stand up, though. You would be surprised how many people have access to these numbers. These numbers are available to anybody who works in middle management. Middle management is housed in the building at 6331 Hollywood Boulevard. It's called the Life Exhibition Building. It's also called the HGB, the Hollywood Guarantee Building. It's the building on Hollywood Boulevard. Is Ivar? I think Ivar might be the cross street that has the big, it's got a big Scientology sign on the top of it. It's not L. Ron Hubbard Way, where Big Blue is. And it's not on Hollywood and La Brea, where Author Services is. It's on Hollywood and Ivar. That is middle management. There are hundreds and hundreds of people who work in middle management. And the people at middle management operate off of the same statistics that the people at international management operate off of. It's just that the people, I think, I might have this wrong, but I want to say that at middle management, they look at those statistics on a 12-week trend or a 3-month trend. And at international management, they look at those statistics at a 6-month trend. If anyone does watch these videos and they were at management and they worked, and I'm wrong on this, please comment below. And I have often wondered why we have not been able to get a copy of those statistics. Because you're right, it is a closely guarded secret. But I think it's closely guarded to the extent that it's almost impossible to get that data onto a drive. I bet the computers that this data is housed on do not have USB ports or the ability to plug in a thumb drive. And also you have to realize that if you're at middle management and let's say you're responsible for this statistic that measures how many people are on course in Scientology, it's your statistic. You're the one responsible for getting that statistic up. So you can't write a letter to the people at International Management being, I really want to file an official complaint about the fact that I'm not getting enough help on getting my statistic up. Like, that would be called reverse management in Scientology, and that's not tolerated. So you don't really get a lot of finger pointing in the Sea Org. You don't get a lot of people pointing the finger above them. It's unheard of. It's like sacrilegious to blame people above you for why your statistic is struggling, even if the person above you has the exact same statistic. So I think I've answered this question. It is a closely guarded secret to the extent that I've never been able to see the numbers firsthand. It's not closely guarded to the extent that there are hundreds and hundreds of people in Scientology management who are aware of the true nature of these statistics. And they know that not only has Scientology not expanded more in the last 5 years than in the last 5 decades, but that it is actually contracting. All right, next. If Miscavige and other high-ranking executives are true believers, what do they think the falling numbers mean for Scientology and Scientology's goals and Scientology's purpose? Again, what they think it means is that there are still people located within Scientology management, whether we're talking about international management, middle management, continental management, that there are still people in this management structure who are secretly suppressing Scientology and trying to undermine everything David Miscavige is doing. I know that sounds ridiculous. That is exactly what people in management think. They don't go, oh my God, Scientology must not work. They don't go, oh my God, David Miscavige is responsible for all this. No, they go, we must be doing something wrong. We're either not doing what L. Ron Hubbard said we should be doing, or we are doing it, and we have people in our midst trying to sabotage us. That is how Sea Org management thinks. Hello in Virginia. Okay, as soon as people start walking in the front door, I'm going to do a quick exit on this video. I'm going to keep going as long as I can. I know you've said that you don't think Miscavige is a true believer anymore because he hasn't been audited in more than a decade. And even if he's not a true believer, he still has a business to run. And he's hemorrhaging customers. And no one new is buying his product. Why doesn't he do obvious things like make the cost of auditing $20 an hour instead of $800 an hour to make it easier to bring new people in and keep them? He's simply pricing out potential buyers who might be interested but simply don't have that kind of money. I don't understand why he wouldn't do this since the church has more than enough money as it is. I totally agree. The guy's fucking insane. I would say he's stupid, but we know he's not stupid. So what's the alternative? He's fucking insane. I think he has something like, I think he's honestly afraid of new people getting into Scientology. I think he knows that everybody in the world knows about fucking Xenu, dude. And if there was a huge influx of people actually getting into Scientology, these people would start talking about Xenu, even if it was just sort of naively mentioning it in their first registration interview. Well, hey, what's the deal about Xenu? Well, chances are the registrar sitting across from this new person has never fucking heard the word Xenu. And because they've never heard the word Xenu, they don't know that it's the closely guarded secret. So if someone new went into a church and sat down with the introductory registrar and mentioned the word Xenu, that staff member might walk around to other staff members going, ha ha ha, this guy thought we believed in something called Xenu. Isn't that stupid? Ha ha ha. And then you'd have this weird situation where staff members were talking about Xenu. But the people in the org who'd done the OT levels know, oh my God, you're not allowed to talk about Xenu. So those people would go to these other staff members and be like, hey, you're not allowed to talk about that. And they'd be like, why not? And then how does the OT explain why you're not allowed to talk about it? You can't say to the person, you're not allowed to talk about Xenu because that's confidential. Because if you say it's confidential, you're admitting it's what's on OT3. But you also can't let people run around talking about Xenu because you're going to get fucking nuked if you let people run around your org talking about Xenu. So it's kind of a catch-22. I seriously think Miscavige doesn't want new people in Scientology. I hope that answers the question. All right, let's see. We've been going for 45 minutes. That's not too bad. And we did just finish an email. All right, let me see if I can find another one here. All right, digging one up. No, it's kind of a loaded question. I'm trying to find an easy one. I have a question for you, which I posted at the end of your last stream. Okay, my question is, how do knowledge reports work? What is the process? I guess I'm interested in the whole process of how they're filed, what detail they typically have, what happens in terms of bringing the subject of the report to heel, to speak, so to speak. It interests me as a watching consent from several sources. Okay, I'm going to bail on this one. You know what? Let me see if I can quickly pull up the comments from this stream and just address a few. How do I see my own stream? How do I pull up my chat? Test. Sorry to keep you hanging here, guys. Just trying to figure out how the hell this works. I totally forgot to tweet the link to this live stream. Oh well. Well, I'm going to spend a couple more minutes trying to figure this shit out, and then I'll just bail. Oh my god, everyone's coming home now. Okay, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.